A cardiologist spent his career restarting hearts. On a February night in 2009, in a rented house north of Montreal, he stopped two of them, his 5-year-old sons and his 3-year-old daughters. 46 wounds between the two children. Then he drank windshield washer fluid and lay down on the bathroom floor to die. He survived. 2 years later, a jury heard all of it and ruled that he was not responsible for any of it. He walked out a free man. Quebec has not forgiven it since. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more cases. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Guy Turcotte was born in 1972 and raised in small-town Quebec, in a family where the path upward ran through school and stayed there. He was not the loud kind of gifted. Teachers remembered a quiet, exacting boy who finished what he started and did not like being corrected. Medicine suited that temperament exactly. He entered it the way careful people enter deep water, slowly, on his own terms, checking the footing. Cardiology was the natural endpoint. It is the most rule-bound discipline in the hospital, a specialty built on numbers, rhythms, and thresholds. A heart either conducts or it doesn't. The rate is either survivable or it isn't. Turcotte learned to read those margins and act inside them. Colleagues at the hospital in Terrebonne, where he eventually took a staff position, described a competent physician with an unremarkable bedside manner. Not cold, just contained. A man who preferred the monitor to the conversation. Isabelle Gaston came at medicine from the opposite direction. She chose emergency medicine, the specialty with no schedule, no continuity, and no time to prepare. Whatever comes through the doors is the case. She was good at it, and the same engine that made her good at it drove everything else in her life. She ran, not casually. Ultra distances, mountain races, the kind of events where the finish line is measured in hours of controlled suffering. People who trained with her noticed that she did not talk herself out of things. She simply kept moving forward until the thing was done. They met inside that shared world of residency and call schedules. Two young doctors who understood the vocabulary and the exhaustion without needing it explained. On paper, it was an ideal match. Two physicians, two incomes, two careers, pointed at the same comfortable future in the Laurentians. The wooded hill country an hour north of Montreal, where Quebec professionals go to raise children within reach of the city, but out of it. They married and settled in Prévost. Olivier arrived in 2003. Anne-Sophie followed 2 years later. The boy took after his father in the way small boys do, watchful, drawn to how things worked, quick to take a toy apart. He had started school. He was learning to read. His sister was still at the age where language arrives in bursts, where a day is measured in snacks and cartoons, and whichever adult is available to be climbed on. By outside measure, the family had everything the region promises. 2 doctors' salaries, a house with room around it, snow in the winter and trails in the summer, and a babysitter on call for the evenings when both parents were working. Photographs from those years show a father who held his children easily, a man visibly proud of them. Inside the house, the arrangement was already under strain. 2 demanding medical careers do not divide neatly into one domestic life. Someone has to be home, and the person who is home is the person who is not advancing. Isabelle did not slow down. Turcotte noticed that she did not slow down. He had built his adult life on order, on knowing what came next and controlling the variables. His marriage was the one system he could not regulate. By late 2008, it was failing. The end did not arrive as a slow drift. It arrived as a discovery. Turcotte found the messages himself. Electronic traces, exchanges between his wife and a man from her training circle, Martin Hute, someone who had been close enough to the family to be unremarkable in it. The tone of the correspondence left no room for a benign reading. Isabelle had been involved with him. For most men, this is a wound. For Turcotte, it was a structural failure. He had ordered his entire adult existence around inputs he could measure and outcomes he could predict. And now the central relationship of that existence had been running a hidden process for months without his knowledge. He had not detected it. He the diagnostician had missed it entirely. He did not confront it once and let it go. He went back into the messages. He read them again, then again. People who knew him at that time described a man conducting a forensic examination of his own humiliation, extracting dates, cross-referencing them against evenings he had spent at home, believing everything was fine, building a timeline of his own blindness. The marriage ended in the first weeks of 2009, not amicably, but without spectacle. There were no police calls, no restraining orders, no history of violence in the house. Whatever was happening to Guy Turcotte was happening on the inside. He moved out. The house he rented was in Piedmont, a small municipality in the Laurentians, a few minutes' drive from the family home in Prévost, close enough to keep the children's school routine intact, far enough to be a separate address. It was a plain place, sparse, the furniture of a man who expects to be somewhere else soon. He had been in it for a matter of weeks. The custody arrangement was shared. The children would move between two houses on a schedule, which is the standard, civilized solution, and which required him to hand them back to her every few days. Every exchange was a reminder. Every drop-off put him at the door of the home he had been removed from. The home where, in his mind, another man's presence was now permanent. Colleagues noticed the physical decline first. He was losing weight. He looked haggard, sleeping badly, running on the thin reserve that doctors learned to run on, and then never quite stop running on. He talked about the separation more than a private man usually would. He talked about it to people who barely knew him. And underneath the grief, there was something harder, which he showed less often, but did show. Not sadness, grievance. He kept returning to the idea that Isabel had taken something from him and had suffered nothing for it. Her career was intact. Her running was intact. Her new relationship was proceeding. He had lost the house, the marriage, the daily presence of his children, and the version of himself that had made sense. And she, in his accounting, had lost nothing at all. He was carrying the entire cost of a decision that had not been his. That is the arithmetic that matters in this case. Not jealousy in the ordinary sense, bookkeeping, a ledger in which he had paid everything and she had paid nothing, and in which the imbalance itself had become intolerable. He was still functioning. That is the part people find hardest to hold. He went to work. He treated patients. He made arrangements, kept appointments, held conversations that no one afterward remembered as alarming. A man in acute distress, certainly. But distress of a kind that thousands of separated fathers move through every year without anyone dying. Nothing in his history pointed forward. No psychiatric record. No prior treatment. No violence. No threats logged with anyone. Whatever conclusion he was arriving at, he arrived at it privately, in a rented house with borrowed furniture over a span of days. On Friday, February 20th, 2009, it was his turn with the children. He picked them up as scheduled. Olivier, 5, was in the last stretch of winter term. And Sophie, 3, went where her brother went. They were two small people packing overnight bags for a weekend at Dad's, an arrangement they had already done several times in a house they were beginning to learn. Isabel handed them over. She would not see them alive again. The evening began as an ordinary custody weekend. He fed them. There was a movie on, the kind of thing a 5-year-old picks and a 3-year-old tolerates. Bath, pajamas, teeth. Olivier was still young enough to want the routine and old enough to negotiate the edges of it. And Sophie went to bed first. Her brother followed. By the time both children were asleep, the house in Piedmont was quiet in the particular way rented houses are quiet. No accumulated noise, no familiar creak in a familiar floorboard. Outside, it was Laurentian February. Packed snow on the driveway. Temperatures well below freezing. The road up the hill empty after dark. At some point that evening, by his own later account, Turcotte had been at the family home in Prévost. He had been in the house he no longer lived in, among the furniture he had chosen, and he had seen what the separation actually looked like from the inside. The physical evidence that his wife's new life had already moved in and taken up room. He did not describe a confrontation. There was no one there to confront. He described looking. Whatever he took from that visit, he brought it back to Piedmont with him and sat with it after the children were down. Then he began making arrangements. He went online. The searches were not idle. They concerned methods of dying. What kills a person? How much of it? How fast? He was a physician. He knew where to look, and he understood what he was reading. Among the things he read about was methanol. He canceled a medical appointment scheduled for the following day. He contacted the babysitter and told her she would not be needed. Each of those acts is small. Together, they describe a man clearing his own calendar, removing, one by one, the people who would otherwise have come to the door. No appointment to miss. No sitter arriving to find anything. A closed house with nobody expected. This is the sequence the Crown would put in front of two juries, 6 years apart. And it is the sequence that makes the case what it is. Because it is orderly. It is a doctor's checklist. It shows a mind still capable of anticipating consequences and eliminating them in advance. In the kitchen, he took 2 knives. One had a blade of about 5 inches. The other was larger, roughly 8 inches of steel. He carried both, and their sheaths, out of the kitchen. What happened next occupied minutes. Olivier was in his bed. Aunt Sophie was in hers. Both children were asleep. Neither was in a position to run, and neither was in a position to fight. And the medical examiner would later establish that the attacks did not end quickly or cleanly. 46 wounds were counted between the two of them. There were defensive injuries. The boy had been awake for part of it. That is as far as the detail needs to go. The house absorbed all of it and made no sound that anyone outside could hear. There were no neighbors close enough. No one called anything in. In one of the most watched criminal cases in Quebec history, the actual crime passed without a single witness beyond the man who committed it. Afterward, he went to the bathroom. He had brought the jug of windshield washer fluid, blue liquid, sold in every service station in the province for a few dollars, and roughly half methanol by volume. He poured it into a drinking glass and drank it. Methanol does not kill immediately. The body converts it over hours into formic acid, and it is the acid that does the work. Metabolic collapse, blindness, organ failure. A cardiologist knows the mechanism. He also knows the timeline. Drinking it is not a quick death. It is a slow one, chosen deliberately, with hours of consciousness left in it. He drank about 3/4 of the container. Then he lay down. The night passed. The furnace cycled. Outside, snow settled on a parked car in a driveway on a quiet street, and the temperature dropped, and nothing about the house from the road suggested anything at all. By Saturday morning, the methanol was well into its work. Turcotte was alive and profoundly ill, vision failing, body acidifying, but not dead. He did not call anyone. He did not open a door. He remained in the house with his children through Saturday and into Sunday, and no one came because he had spent Friday night making certain no one would. Meanwhile, the phone calls started. Family members could not reach him. That was unusual enough to note, but not alarming on the first day. By the second, the silence had a different quality. No answer, no callback, a car in the driveway. The children were supposed to be with him. Nobody could reach the children either. His mother made the decision. Frightened that her son had attempted to take his own life, she asked police to go to the house and check. The call that opened this case did not describe a homicide. It described a worried mother who thought her son might have hurt himself. Sûreté du Québec officers reached the address on Sunday. The car was in the driveway, exactly where it had been. Every door on the house was locked. They forced their way in. The first officers through the door found the house intact. No forced entry, no overturned furniture, no signs of a struggle in the living areas, nothing disturbed on the ground floor. Whatever they had been braced for, it was not this. An ordinary rented home in ordinary order, warm, lit only by whatever light came through the windows off the snow. They found Turcotte first. He was on his back, conscious enough to register their presence, in a condition no one could mistake for anything but critical. Nearby was a drinking glass and a jug of blue washer fluid, drained to a quarter. He was arrested where he lay. Then they went into the bedrooms. Officers who have described that moment publicly have done so sparingly. The children were in their beds, both of them. A knife was recovered from Olivier's room, a second from the bathroom, along with the sheaths for both. Crime scene technicians would photograph all of it over the following hours. The beds, the blood on the bathtub, the two blades laid out beside evidence markers. And those photographs would eventually be shown to two separate juries, with warnings issued in advance each time. Turcotte was taken out of the house alive and moved to hospital in Montreal. The medical situation was severe. Methanol poisoning at that volume, left untreated for the better part of 2 days, does not usually leave a survivor. He required intensive intervention. His vision was compromised. For weeks, he was too ill to be brought before a court, and when the charges were formally laid, 2 counts of first-degree murder, he was still in a hospital bed, unable to attend his own arraignment. He had planned his death with a physician's precision and had failed at it anyway. Isabelle Gaston was working the emergency room the weekend her children died. She was told by police. Then she was told by doctors, which meant she received the information twice. Once as a mother, once in the clinical vocabulary of her own profession, the language she used every shift to explain deaths to other people's families. There is no protection in knowing the terminology. It only removes the possibility of hope faster. Everything she had lost had been taken by the man she had shared a life with, in a house she had never lived in, on a weekend she had approved. The funeral was held in Montreal, 2 small caskets. The church filled beyond capacity, mostly with strangers, people from Prévost, from Piedmont, from Saint-Jérôme, from across the Laurentians, who had no connection to the family beyond having read the same headlines and having children roughly the same age. The priest who presided, Raymond Gravel, spoke afterward about the mother's composure. She had asked her children, out loud, to help her get through it. The region did not settle down after that. The Laurentians are not anonymous country. Prévost and Piedmont are small municipalities where the pharmacist knows the school teacher and the hospital in Saint-Jérôme serves everyone within an hour's drive. Turcotte had been a physician inside that network. People had been treated by him. People had sat in his waiting room with their own cardiac symptoms and trusted his judgment, and now they were reading about what had been recovered from his bathroom. The rumors ran fast and mostly ran wrong. That the mother had been present. That there had been a confrontation in the house. That someone in the medical community had seen it coming and said nothing. None of it held, but the reflex behind it was real. A community trying to locate a warning sign because the alternative was accepting that there hadn't been one. Parents in the area started asking a question that had no useful answer. How do you tell? Custody exchanges in Quebec that spring were quieter and more careful. For a while, everyone in the region was doing arithmetic on their own neighbors. And in a Montreal hospital, under guard, the only person who knew what had actually happened in that house was recovering. He would eventually be well enough to talk about it. When he did, he offered an account that split the province in half. There was no manhunt in this case, no suspect pool, no alibi to break, no forensic puzzle. The accused had been carried out of the crime scene by paramedics. He would formally acknowledge, in writing, that he had caused both deaths. Everything therefore came down to a single question, and it was not a question police could answer with evidence bags. It was a question about the inside of one man's skull on one night. Had Guy Turcotte known what he was doing? Canadian law provides a specific off-ramp for defendants who did not. A person suffering from a mental disorder so severe that they could not appreciate the nature of their act, or could not know it was wrong, is not convicted and is not acquitted. They are found not criminally responsible. They go to a secure psychiatric institution, and they stay there until a review board decides they are no longer a significant threat. That was the defense. The first trial opened in 2011 in Saint-Jérôme, and it became a duel between psychiatrists. The defense account went like this. a man in acute distress after the collapse of his marriage, sleepless, barely eating, unraveling over a period of weeks. On that Friday night, he went to the family home, saw the physical proof that his wife's new relationship had taken over the space he used to occupy, and something gave way. He returned to Piedmont and decided to kill himself. He drank the washer fluid, and then, according to this version, the methanol itself did the rest. Poisoning superimposed on an already disintegrating mental state, producing what the defense called an adaptation disorder, severe enough to strip away his capacity for judgment. He did not decide to kill his children. He was, in that account, no longer capable of deciding anything. The Crown's account used the same facts and reached the opposite place. He canceled the appointment. He told the babysitter not to come. He searched for methods of death before anything happened. Those are not the acts of a man whose reasoning has dissolved. They are the acts of a man securing a window of time, and the target was not chosen at random. The one thing that could be taken from Isabelle Gaston, the only thing that would cost her what he believed he had been made to pay, was standing in 2 bedrooms down the hall. Not madness, retaliation, executed by a man who was still thinking clearly enough to clear his calendar. The problem for investigators, and it is the frustration that defines this whole case, is that the record refused to break either way. They went looking for a psychiatric history and found none. No prior diagnosis, no hospitalization, no prescriptions, no treating psychiatrist, nothing on file anywhere in the province. A man who worked inside the health system his entire adult life had never once presented for mental health care. They went looking for premeditation older than that weekend and found none of that either. No threats logged with anyone, no stockpiled weapons. The knives came out of his own kitchen drawer. No note, no plan committed to paper, no confided intention. Colleagues had noticed a man visibly falling apart, which is not evidence of anything except a man visibly falling apart. They examined the methanol theory, and it cut in 2 directions at once. He drank it after the children were dead, which undermines the argument that the poisoning caused the acts. But he was a physician who had researched it in advance, which means he understood the timeline he was choosing, which suggests intact reasoning at exactly the moment the defense needed him to have none. Every promising line closed. What remained were 2 coherent stories built from identical material, and 11 ordinary people in a jury box in Saint-Jérôme who had to pick one. They deliberated for 10 days. On July 5th, 2011, the verdict came back. Not criminally responsible on account of mental disorder. There was noise in the courtroom before the words finished. Isabelle Gaston sat through it, then went outside to face the cameras, and what she said would set the direction of the next 4 years. She did not describe a legal setback. She described a judicial error that appalled her, a system that had, in her view, failed to try her children's case at all. Turcotte was sent to the Philippe Pinel Institute, Quebec's maximum security psychiatric hospital. Not for a fixed term. There is no fixed term. He would be held until a review board judged him safe to release. Across the province, people did the arithmetic on that sentence and understood something that had not fully registered before. He had not been sentenced to anything. There was no number attached to him. He could be out in years. He could be out sooner. He was out in 17 months. In December 2012, the review board ruled that Guy Turcotte no longer represented a significant threat to public safety. He was released on conditions. Quebec came apart over it. The reaction was not confined to the Laurentians this time. It was provincial and then national. Tens of thousands signed petitions. People marched in Montreal and outside courthouses, many of them carrying photographs of 2 children they had never met. Radio phone-in lines ran on the subject for weeks. A case name became shorthand for a broken statute. You did not have to explain what you meant by l'affaire Turcotte, and you did not have to explain what you meant by asking whether someone would get the Turcotte defense. The specific detail that enraged people was not the verdict alone. It was the arithmetic. 2 children dead, 46 wounds, 17 months of custody, and a man now living in the community with a driver's license and a grocery list. He was photographed in public. Those photographs circulated. The sight of him buying things in a store did more damage to public confidence in the not criminally responsible provision than any legal argument ever had. Politicians heard it. The federal government was already moving on reform, and the Turcotte case became one of the 2 names permanently attached to that push. The legislation that followed created a high-risk designation for the most serious cases, lengthened the intervals between review hearings, and wrote victims' families more firmly into the process. It changed nothing retroactively. It changed everything about how the next case would run. Isabelle Gaston did not go quiet. She could have. She had every reason to disappear into private grief, and she was warned repeatedly that speaking publicly would cost her. She spoke anyway, to reporters, to committees, to anyone who would carry the argument further, not for revenge, as she put it, but because a verdict that erased responsibility erased her children along with it. She was a physician arguing against the misuse of psychiatry in a courtroom, which gave her a credibility no advocacy group could have manufactured, and she used it without pause for 4 years. Meanwhile, the Crown was appealing. In November 2013, the Quebec Court of Appeal delivered its ruling. The trial judge's instructions to the first jury had been flawed. The panel had not been properly directed on how to separate a genuine incapacity to know right from wrong from a man who simply made a monstrous choice while distraught. The verdict was annulled. A new trial was ordered on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Turcotte turned himself in that same evening and was taken back into custody after nearly a year and a half of freedom. His lawyers went to the Supreme Court of Canada, arguing he should not be made to stand trial twice for the same night. The country's highest court declined to hear it. The second trial opened in Saint-Jérôme in September 2015 before Justice André Vincent. More than 1,600 people were summoned to produce a jury because finding 12 Quebecers who had not already formed a view of this case had become close to impossible. It ran for nearly 3 months. The same photographs were shown. The same knives were entered into evidence. The same quarter-empty jug of blue fluid. On the second day, an 11-page admission was filed in which Turcotte again acknowledged that he had caused both deaths. The psychiatric experts came back and made their arguments again. 1 juror was discharged during the proceedings, leaving 11. This time, the Crown sequence landed. The canceled appointment, the dismissed babysitter, the searches, a man arranging his own privacy in advance. The jury deliberated for 7 days. On December 6, 2015, they returned a unanimous verdict, guilty of second-degree murder on both counts. Second degree carries an automatic life sentence in Canada. The only question left was how long before he could apply for release. The Crown asked for 20 years. In January 2016, Justice Vincent set it at 17, describing what had been done in that house as heinous and horrible. Turcotte fought the number. His lawyer argued before the Court of Appeal that he had been a loving father in a state of despair, that he posed no danger to anyone, that 10 to 15 years was the appropriate range. In June 2018, the court rejected it unanimously. The judgment noted the tender age of the 2 victims, the vicious manner of their deaths, and the devastation inflicted on their mother, and stated the point plainly. His degree of responsibility was complete. He alone was responsible for both murders. He chose not to take it to the Supreme Court. 17 years, running from 2015. He remains in a Canadian federal institution. Isabelle Gaston kept running. Long distances, mountain courses, hours at a time. The only thing that had ever answered the question of what to do with an unbearable amount of energy and nowhere to put it. She fought for 6 years to have her children's deaths called what they were. She won that. It bought her a verdict and a number and nothing else. Olivier would be in his 20s now, and Sophie would be old enough to have left home. Their father is still alive. That was never his plan either. If you are finished watching, you're a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and give it a like. See you in the next video.